So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Lara Steil. Lara, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kathleen, and good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be today here with you. It's a pleasure for me. And as Kathleen said, I work now for FAO here in Rome, but and I'm working here since last July. Before that, I worked for the Brazilian Center for Prevention and Suppression of Wildfires. So I will talk a little bit or a lot about the work I did in Brazil. So it's because of that I worked 17 years there, and so you are going to listen a lot of Brazil today. And so my contributions to the symposium today are related to the key role of indigenous and traditional communities in the dialogue of knowledge for the promotion of the integrated fire management. Many countries have a history of a zero fire policy, with fire being considered always detrimental. And this approach led to biomass accumulation and large scale and high intensity fires, because the implementation of actions beyond those of suppression were very scarce. And this approach generated many conflicts with the traditional and indigenous communities, since for most part of them, fire is an important element of their lives. And the zero fire policy led to changes in habitats and traditional practices, as well as loss of traditional knowledge. And according to indigenous people from Brazil, the zero fire policies worsened the problem since the fuel management usually conducted by the communities were not happening anymore. And in addition to that, indigenous territories were not served with a firefighting program. So the agencies responsible for fire management in indigenous lands started to work together with the communities, and a change began to happen. This change from a zero fire policy to a policy where fire is seen as a management tool. And this paradigm shift started to be promoted towards the integrated fire management. Countries in Latin America and in other parts of the world as well are following a path of change from a fire management focused mainly on suppression to the integrated fire management, where the fire culture from communities is a key element, in addition to the understanding of fire ecology and the strategies of fire management. And this new approach is arriving immersed in a matrix of governance, influencing the public policies. This change has been possible thanks to a fire culture, since the communities use fire to meet basic needs, and the indigenous communities have been shaping landscapes for thousands of years, maintaining the ecosystems in health conditions. The traditional knowledge and the practices are shared generation after generation in a dynamic process of continuing observations and direct interdependent relationships with the ecosystems. And because of their knowledge, because of that, their knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, has well-known cultural and ecological parameters. And at this point, I would like to bring to my presentation a phrase that it's in the summary of the foundation of the indigenous peoples burning network in the United States. And that is saying, our culture is completely dependent upon fire. Without fire, our culture will not survive. It's that simple. And in addition to that, I would like to point out that many ecosystems are dependent upon fire and will not survive as they are today without fire. And it's that simple. So that said, and taking this into account, it's clear that the cultural perceptions about the benefits of burning should be incorporated into agencies' strategies. And this integration will help address the underlying causes of fire at the territory. In addition, agencies can learn from local communities the role of fire on the local ecosystems, where fire is beneficial, where fire is a threat. But how can we make a participatory plan for avoiding these damaging fires? One of the answers for this question is to establish with the communities the period in which fauna and flora are more affected by fire in that territory. What are the periods in which fire can be beneficial? And link this information with scientific and practitioners' knowledge. The communities are important sources of information and of possible solutions. And one thing that I think it's very important, we should see communities not as the cause of fire problem, but communities are part of the solutions to fire problems. And now, as I said before, I will show you the experience of Brazil on integrated fire management in indigenous lands. And this strategy has been carried out by the National Center for Prevention and Suppression of Wildfires, where I worked before FAO. The path that Brazil has been taking since 2015 is through the empowerment of traditional indigenous knowledge. And the first step that Brazil carried out was the establishment of monthly calendars showing what are the priority natural resources to be preserved and the associated potential damage caused by fire according to the period of the year. And so when the plants are flowering, when they are fruiting, when animals are nesting, breastfeeding, when happen the parental care of animals. And this calendar was filled in by the elders of the communities. And this was a way to save the traditional knowledge of these communities. And the calendar looks like this one with the annual cycle of the Cerrado, the Brazilian savanna. And also here you can see the environmental resources of a Cerrado, so plants and animals, and the important periods for these resources, when plants are flowering, when they are fruiting, and also the periods of birth and growth of animals. When the indigenous knowledge is not applied in these areas, wildfires happen in the late dry season, that in the case of savanna, the Cerrado in Brazil is from June, July to October. And so when these late dry season fires happened, the resources that Cerrado provides are damaged. But when the traditional knowledge is used, fire is applied as prescribed burning. And at the beginning of the dry season or at the end of the rainy season, minimizing the occurrence of the late dry season fires. And the resources provided by Cerrado are preserved because their critical periods of reproduction are protected. And based on this methodology, or on this approach, a methodology was developed in Brazil. And this methodology starts with local knowledge and walk through technological tools like the development of fuel load maps, of course, with community validation, and also participatory planning and implementation are carried out. And this methodology finishes with the evaluation and monitoring of the actions that were developed. The initial positive outcomes of this approach in indigenous lands in Brazil show us that when we increase the area where prescribed burnings are applied, we decrease the areas affected by wildfires in the late dry season. Also, the preliminary results show to us that suppression actions are facilitated when prescribed burnings are applied. Less time is spent for fighting the same fire. Also, was observed an improvement in the effectiveness of fire suppression efforts, increasing firefighter safety. Also, we noted a reduction of large-scale uncontrolled wildfires. And we observed a change in the fire regime. The fires in the late dry season moved to the end of the rainy season and the early dry season. Also, through this approach, was possible to promote the dialogue of knowledge. As I said before, this dialogue of knowledge include the knowledge of science, of practitioners, and also of the communities. And also with this approach was possible to promote the empowerment of local communities. And when we empower them, we have these communities work together with the agencies. And this is very, very positive. Another example of this approach is in Venezuela. There are many examples, other examples. I will mention in my presentation only two. And this one is in Venezuela, in the Canaima Park. And there, a participatory action integrated indigenous knowledge with the scientific and technical knowledge in the Gran Sabana ecosystems in this park, Canaima Park. And Gran Sabana is an area of the Pemon people. Pemon people is an indigenous people from Venezuela. And in their territory are produced 70% of the Venezuelan hydroelectric power. So this territory is very important for the country. The enterprise responsible for the hydroelectric plant that's called Copoelec had a zero fire policy. And this created conflicts over the fire use by Pemon people. People started to call the Pemon people as Kemon, and Kemon means arsonists. But in this participatory action research, controlled burns, prescribed burns were carried out, simulating the Pemon practices and creating a path mosaic burning in savanna areas. These mosaics were similar to the patterns produced by ancestral Pemon practices. The outcomes of this experiment showed that the areas where fire was excluded had a trend to the occurrence of high intensity fires. So this experiment show clearly that the Pemon fire practices are the right procedure to be applied for a healthy environment in this area. And nowadays, the government and the enterprise responsible for this hydroelectric power are following the Pemon orientation for managing fire in this territory. Also, another example, now we jump to the other side of the world, is in Australia. And this example is the Aboriginal burning in Kakadu National Park in the Northern Territory in Australia. And Aboriginal peoples burn wetlands, and when they do, when they do not conduct these burnings, the natural and introduced grasses become dense monocultures, reducing the variety of habitats and preventing some species from feeding and limiting access for hunting and food gathering by Aboriginal people. Aboriginal use of fire control the density of grass, keeping the diversity of habitats. In this park, in Kakadu National Park, water birds are good indicators of wetland health. And as you can see in this graph, when Aboriginal knowledge on fire use is applied, is this part of the graph, the abundance of birds and the number of species are higher compared with areas where the Aboriginal burns are not applied. So we can see that the Aboriginal burning is the way that keeps this environment health. So this approach seems to be amazing, but what are the challenges that we have? One of the main challenges is that efforts must be conducted to go beyond opinion consultations and achieve inclusive spaces for true dialogue of knowledge, because communities preserve the knowledge and fire management practices that have allowed them to survive and adapt to a wide variety of environmental conditions. And this knowledge must be recorded. And also the community's knowledge who live in the area is the most valuable. Sorry. And also it's important to evaluate the fire issues under climate change scenarios and promote actions adapted to cultural, socioeconomic, ecological, and governmental realities. And that said, the future expectations go through empowering communities to find local solutions for global outcomes, and also I believe, and my team believe, and many agencies believe that promoting the dialogue of knowledge, so putting in the same table researchers, practitioners, indigenous and traditional communities, this dialogue of knowledge has the potential to reduce the vulnerability of people and landscapes for a better environment and for a better life. It's important to note that the integrated fire management supports many of the sustainable development goals. No poverty, zero hunger, gender equality, clean water, climate action, life below water, life on land, and partnership. So what FIO has been working to contribute directly to these achievements, and our efforts goes through the development of multi-country projects on integrated fire management. So we have a project going on in Southeast Asia. We are developing a concept note in Latin America, and we are planning to have another project in Southern Africa. Also, we are supporting the global cooperation, and together with the United Nations Environment Program, we are working on a global fire management hub. And this hub aims to be, this platform aims to be a hub for information and knowledge, for exchanging, sharing, and engaging countries, stakeholders, and communities in order to strengthen capacities to implement integrated fire management, to reduce the negative impacts of wildfires on livelihoods, landscapes, and the global climate. And I finished my presentation. I'm a little bit late, sorry for that. I finished my presentation with the information of the next International Wildland Fire Conference. Probably many of you already know about it. For those who don't know about it, I encourage you to follow the website of the conference, and maybe you can also join us next year in Porto, in Portugal.